Hi guys, this is LAWS12059 Conveyancing and my name's AJ George. I'll be your unit coordinator for this term. This is just our welcome video. I've made a short Prezi presentation to discuss a few things that you'll need to know for this unit, and so we'll just hop across to the Prezi now. Firstly, as I said, I'm AJ George. I will be placing up little key concept videos for you each week. These aren't designed to be really long, lengthy expositions of the text because you can do that stuff for yourself. I guess what I'm really trying to do with this unit is, particularly because it's a second or third year unit, is act more as a guide from the side. So the short videos that you'll get each week are more key concept videos for particularly curly concepts or other particularly interesting facts that I want to flag your attention to in terms of the reading materials for each week. My email details are there on screen for you, and also the Facebook page for CQU Law. If you're not already following that and you are on Facebook, I'd strongly suggest that you jump on and follow that page because there's loads of information about your studies on there. The other way to keep in touch with things, particularly your colleagues in this unit, is via Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft Teams has all the look and feel of social media. This isn't a Microsoft Teams screenshot, by the way. I'll take you there in just a minute. But it's really important to keep in touch with your colleagues as you're going through your units. Perhaps if you're a third year student, you probably already know the value of networking. The people that you're studying with are going to be your colleagues ultimately, so it's really worth making the time and effort to reach out and make friends, make study buddies. It's a very, very useful thing. I can't recommend it highly enough. Plus, it just makes learning a little less isolated, a little bit more fun. I'll take you to the Microsoft Teams site from our Moodle page now. Okay, so here we are at our LAWS12059 Conveyancing Moodle page, and you will see that up the top right hand side of the screen there is a little Microsoft Teams button. You can navigate to the Microsoft Teams page directly from Moodle. How great is that? Makes conversing with your colleagues very, very quick and easy. Microsoft Teams will boot up, as you can see, and then here we go. It will take you to your chat channel for LAWS12059 Conveyancing, as you can see there. Now, if you have a number of other units, then the way that you navigate back to find the Microsoft Team for your other units is just by pressing this little Teams button here on the left-hand nav bar, and that will take you to all of the different teams that you are in. So you will see 12059 Conveyancing is right there for you. The general channel will basically be just for news items that I need to share with you, and the social chit chat channel will contain all of the lovely discussions that we wish to have to get to know each other. Please do make use of the Teams website. I really believe that connection and communication amongst students really just gives your learning experience a real lift. And as I said, it offsets that feeling of isolation when you know that there's other people doing exactly the same thing and probably thinking of the same questions as you, possibly even at the same time. So that's Microsoft Teams. Let's get on with our Prezi and talk about the things that are near and dear to our heart, our text and our assessment. Okay, in case you haven't sourced your text yet, and I would strongly recommend that you do try and grab a second-hand copy if you can, because I would suspect that a new edition may be available soon. So try looking in the CQU textbooks Facebook page, because you'll often find that students have second-hand texts to sell there at very reasonable prices. So see if you can get the Christensen, Dixon, Duncan, Jones text through that mechanism, or beg, borrow, or steal, maybe not steal, a copy from one of your friends that might have done this unit previously. So that's your text. First assessment, no real magic here. In fact, it's already up on your Moodle page, as I say there. 20% of your marks for a written assessment. And this term, that written assessment is a mock article that you will get to write for the Proctor magazine, which is a magazine that goes out to all the Queensland members of the Queensland Law Society. So have a look. As I said, all the details are already up on Moodle, and you'll have pretty much from week 1 to get cracking on that assignment. It's only 1,400 words, and I'm hoping that you'll actually find it quite fun, because it's it's more journalistic style. It's still very professional writing, but it will be writing for a targeted audience, and you can put in some graphics if you wish and make it look more like a magazine article. Throw in some creativity, I don't mind. The guidelines are up there for you already. As far as assessment 2 goes, 30% of your marks there. Another written assessment. This one's a little bit more traditional, designed to scaffold you into the end of term assessment. And this one will be released on Moodle after your first assessment has closed, so later on, so you're not stressing because you've got all the assignments up already at the start of term. So that problem will be released later on, and it will be the usual IRAC type response that will be required there. And then finally, for this unit, we have a 50% take-home paper. And I'm sure that many of you have done take-home papers before. 24 hours duration. It'll be a form of written assessment again, and I haven't drafted it yet, but usually there will be a smattering, a smorgasbord, if you will, of various different things in there for you. I usually put in a problem question and some short answer questions as well. So obviously more details will be released on Moodle closer to the time. But the date itself actually has already been organised, and the date for release of this paper will be Friday the 23rd of October, and it will be due on Saturday the 24th of October. So that's for T2 2020, and that's our assessment there. And finally, a little bit more detail on what this unit is, a little bit of nuts and bolts for you. Quite often in the conveyancing unit, there are students that are actually out there in the real world doing conveyancing, actually in a conveyancing practice. And so I guess they come to this unit thinking that it's going to be trying to teach them pretty much what they already know. And the beautiful thing is, for anybody that's in that situation, no, that isn't what this unit is all about. It's not a step-by-step guide on what to do, forms to fill out in order to effectively, undertake a conveyance and get across the line with an effective settlement. That kind of practical skill-based learning will be part of your practical legal training that you'll do once you actually finish your degree studies. Or I think you can actually start your PLT slightly earlier before you finish your degree now, so you might want to look into that. So it's not about that kind of skills-based stuff. This conveyancing unit loads you up, proverbially speaking, with all the legal knowledge that you'll need that sits underneath the components that go into an effective conveyance. And so I'll tell you a brief overview of the material for the unit, and then I'm going to take you to a bit of a mind map just for those people that are actually doing conveyancing, so you can see where the material fits into a typical conveyance scenario. So here we have weeks 1 and 2. This is the groundwork that you need to do to prepare yourself in terms of your legal knowledge, particularly focused on ethics and duties, because there are a lot of thorny issues in conveyancing that can test your ethical knowledge. So you really need to be up to speed with all of the various different solicitors' duties that you will owe to your clients, particularly conflicts of interest. That's a nasty one. So we do that in weeks 1 and 2. We also look at the real estate agent's duties and how to go about properly appointing them, and naughty things not to do in terms of misrepresentation. Now, that is a handy cue for me, because I wanted to flag for you that a lot of this unit should actually seem like revision from your contract law unit. And I also take contract, so love the contract part of this course. And so we get to revise our misrepresentation and misleading and deceptive conduct material that we did from contract law. And then we move on to weeks 3 and 4, and they deal with disclosure, pre-contractual disclosure. And we look at all the various different things that the seller needs to disclose, particularly defects in title, quality of title issues we have a look at, and we look at disclosure at law and under statute. Then we look at formation of contract and deposit. And again, this should seem very familiar to you. Things like the doctrine of part performance. Hello, Hennig and Isaacs. Variation and discharge. We look particularly at things that happen around this time. So the cooling off period will start to run once the contract has been formed. So we look at the cooling off period, installment sales, prohibited contracts and things like that. And obviously the big one, the deposit. Week 7, we look a little bit further at description of subject matter. Now, it might seem to you that, hang on a minute, if we've been looking at, preparing the groundwork, the duties, and then looking at, the pre-contract stuff, the disclosure that goes on, and then formation of the contract, hang on a minute, why are we arcing back to description of subject matter? The answer to that is I don't know, because that's the way that the authors of the text have actually arranged it. I may play around a little bit with the order of the units later on down the track, but don't worry too much about that. The other thing that I would kind of group in here with description of subject matter is the week 9 on special conditions. So really, I think probably those two, week 7 and week 9, probably go nicely together, probably more sensibly before formation of contract, but we'll do them as the study guide has set them out and as the text has also set them out. And then in week 8, we get to look at contract to completion. So once you've actually got your contract up and running, what are all the things that you need to think about in terms of your legal knowledge? What legal knowledge do you need to be equipped with to get your client all the way from forming your contract all the way up to completion? Week 10, we look at some more contract stuff, yay, and this is my real favourite stuff, as you will know if you had me for contract law. So termination, damages, specific performance, and the one particular to conveyancing, recovering deposit. So they are the components of your unit this term. And what I'll take you to now, just a little snippet for those that actually have been engaged in doing some conveyancing. You might have done your own conveyance, who knows? Then I'll take you to my mind map, and we can see where all of this stuff plugs into the steps that are involved in effecting a conveyance. So here we are at the little mind map that I have prepared for you for the steps in a conveyance, and where our legal knowledge that we're going to learn in this unit plugs into those steps, so you can see where it becomes relevant in the process of the conveyance. Now, I've made these mind maps, made one for the buyer and one for the seller, so there's obviously different steps in each where you're acting for a buyer or a seller. And it's based on this handy dandy document, which you will find in your e-reading list which is up the top of the navigation ribbon in Moodle. And you can download that photocopy of the table there. This table is compiled from the resource that you'll get when you do your practical legal training, the College of Law papers, and there's a really great one in there, as I said, which is why we've got it as an e-reading, that sets out really nicely and in a handy, concise fashion all of the different steps that you need to attend to when you are actually conducting a conveyance for a client. And the major stuff I've plugged into this mind map. Now, don't get freaked out by this. You're not going to have to know this stuff. As I said, this is just a little bit of information so that you can get your head around where the knowledge becomes useful that we're going to learn in this unit along the steps of a conveyance. So this one here is, as you can see there, a mind map acting for a seller. And if I just make it a little bit bigger, most of the stuff in terms of acting for a seller, most of the stuff in the front half of the unit, in fact the bulk of the unit, will have already pretty much occurred even before you get your instructions from the client. Because when you think about it, normally what will happen is a buyer and a seller will be dealing with the agent, and they'll get the contract together, the contract will be signed, and then it lobs on your desk and you get your instructions to act for either the buyer or the seller. Now, at that point, there has been a lot of things that have already happened between the parties, and so this is why I've grouped all of the week content headings here pretty much at the very beginning of the process, because you need to be across all of this stuff before you even get your instructions. So weeks 1 and 2, ethics, obviously you've got to be across that before you get your instructions. Weeks 3 and 4, disclosure before contract. So if you're acting for a seller in a conveyance, they will have already done pretty much most of their disclosure before the contract has even come to your desk. So nevertheless, you're going to have to work out whether they have satisfied their disclosure obligations. You'll also have to check things like the description of the subject matter and the special conditions. Then you'll need to work out whether the contract has been validly formed and look at things like the deposit. So pretty much weeks 1 through 6 are all located here, as well as 7 and 9. Okay, so then once you've obtained your copy of your contract, you need to, apart from some procedural things there, you need to read and advise on your contract. So you need to look at things like the cooling off period. There's a stack of other things that you'll need to advise on. Some of them we will discuss in the unit and some of them we won't. We do obviously look at the standard versions of the contract here, and we look at the POA stands for Property Occupations Act, so we do look at the Property Occupations Act and compliance there. You need to advise the client of the steps in the transaction and their obligations regarding settlement, and you need to do all your searches. And this is where it becomes very important to marry up your legal knowledge about the seller's obligations of disclosure and put it all into practice there. Once you've got your results of your searches back and you've found the encumbrances and easements, mortgages, leases, so on, you need to also look at unregistered encumbrances that may be on the property, and you need to work out whether the seller has duly disclosed everything in the contract as they are supposed to. You need to, if the seller is a company, go and do your ASIC searches, get all the company name and number details from ASIC, make sure that they're all correct. The buyer's solicitor will send the draft transfer documents, so there's some procedures there which you'll need to attend to, and obviously you need to check to make sure that everything's signed correctly if it's all good to go. And then there are the next major step. The major steps are in blue here. Preparing settlement statement, and that is the seller's obligation to give the buyer a breakdown of all of the various different charges that are made on the property. For example, council rates, water rates, any notices that apply to the property, that works may have to be done to the property, for example, from the council. All of that kind of thing. If there are charges attached to that, then you've got to set out all of the fees and charges, and you apportion them between the parties. That's the settlement statement's job, and that's what you will be drafting up if you are acting for the seller. We don't actually get you to draft those things up. Those kinds of things typically will be done in your PLT, but we certainly touch on the topic of settlement statements here, because you need to know the law and the case law particularly in relation to apportionment. So there's often some fights around who has to pay what and in what proportion. They are the things that we'll be looking at. Then really week 8 is our big one here, contract to completion. And we look at, apart from apportionment, caveats, settlement notices and things like that, preparing your transfer, and obviously those essential time stipulations. Hello, you should be hearing your contract bells going again. Then once you've got your title documents, you've confirmed all the settlement arrangements, you attend on settlement. And again, we have some other things in week 8 that are relevant here. So we look at settlement, tender, possession, and passing of property in chattels and so forth. Week 9 was the week on special conditions, so that for the seller that occurs, that kind of knowledge will be relevant more at the front end when you're trying to work out whether there's been sufficient drafting of the special condition there. So then we flip to week 10 and remedies, and we look at termination and damages and so forth there. And obviously your last steps are to close your file once you've successfully transferred the property to the purchaser. So that's where our knowledge comes into line for a seller in terms of the conveyancing process. And the other mind map I did was for a buyer. And again, your ethics knowledge plugs in there at the front end. And then we look at contract formation, description of subject matter, all this good stuff in weeks 5, 6 and 7. That comes in a little bit earlier here than weeks 3 and 4. So we look at all of this stuff to do with contract formation. Obviously week 7 subject matter, and week 9 is also relevant here. That's your special conditions. So you've got to look at issues like cooling off. Weeks 5 and 6 we look at that. Caveat emptor principles. We've got to look at all of the issues here that the buyer needs to look at. Do they want to make the purchase subject to building and pest inspection? Do they want to they need to get a pool safety certificate if there is a pool. Special conditions, as I've already mentioned. You've got to get your searches necessary to ensure clear title. You've got to explain all of the disclosure obligations that the seller has to you, and that is where weeks 3 and 4 then come in handy, all the knowledge that we'll be picking up in weeks 3 and 4. You need to advise your buying client that they are entitled to be duly informed about the property to make an informed purchase. And so you need to go through everything to make sure that the seller actually has disclosed everything that they are required to do, and that can only really be done once you've got the title searches. You'll find all of the stuff there that's been registered. There may be unregistered interests as well, which you need to get to the bottom of. And so we discuss all of those defects in title, quality of title, and that kind of thing. Once you have got the client's instructions after your searches, then you need to find out things like, was the pest inspection okay? Was the building inspection okay? And all of those little steps in the interim there. And then you need to, the client may well come back to you and say, oh, hang on a minute, the pest inspection's no good. We need to start thinking about our rights to terminate here. So week 10, as I said, is the rights to terminate. So they may well kick in quite early for the buyer if they are not satisfied with the way things are going. or may even kick in earlier again if there's been some disclosure issues up front. Then obviously it's the buyer's obligation to draft up the transfer. Well, I wouldn't say obligation, it's their convention that the buyer will draft up the transfer documents and send them off to the seller's solicitors. Make all your initial arrangements for settlement. Here is our week 8 contract to completion information. So again, it kicks in towards the latter half of the unit and towards the latter end of the conveyance process as well. Once you've made all your arrangements, then you need to obtain your balance settlement funds, ensure they're all cleared, obviously, because the funds have got to change hands on the settlement date, and all of the things that you need to do on the date of settlement. Hopefully, finally, you'll get to that hurdle there, reporting to your client that you've got everything finished and done, and they've had a satisfactory settlement. You've got to write to your client when the transfer documents are registered, and again, the end of the line is closing your file and so forth. So that is the purchaser's mind map, and as I said, that's all based on the big ticket items that you will find in the College of Law table that is available on Moodle for you to download. If you wish to print the mind maps just to kind of get everything straight in your head as to where the unit's going, I've made both the URLs for these mind maps and also PDFs of the mind maps if it's just easier to download and print them out on Moodle for you. So that's about all I've got to say in terms of the nuts and bolts of the unit and where your knowledge will fit into the conveyancing process. So here we are back at our Prezi, and that's all, folks, for our welcome introductory video. I hope that things are falling into place for you now as to where your knowledge will come in handy at what stage of the conveyancing process. Like I said, don't let those little mind maps freak you out at all. You don't need to know all of those messy points in the mind map. I just thought it would be useful for you to see the steps at a glance so that you know where the knowledge that you're going to be picking up in this unit will plug into your practical skills when you come to do them later on in your practical legal training. So nice to meet you all, and I hope to chat with you in the Zoom sessions. They will be Thursdays this term at 7 p.m. So I hope to see you at the Zoom sessions. If not, definitely come in and talk to the me and your colleagues on Teams, or you can shoot me an email, or you can catch up with me on the Facebook. I administrate the CQU Law Facebook page. So hope to chat soon. Bye, guys.